Hello, my dear ones. This is Granny settling my shawl around my shoulders and pulling you just a little closer. Welcome to Granny's Whisper. As we always do before we begin, let me ask, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city or your country in the comments. I love to know where my family of listeners gather from. If you are new here, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy our stories, please like, share, and subscribe. Tonight I'm going to tell you a story about a wedding dress that never saw the aisle. About a girl who thought her future was a straight road ribboned with roses, only to find a detour with thorns. And then, somehow, a garden she never knew she could plant. It's a story of scandal and heartbreak, yes, but also courage, forgiveness, and a new kind of love. The grown, quiet kind that doesn't need a parade to prove itself. If you're carrying disappointment like a stone in your pocket, keep listening. We're going to set it down together by the end. Before we dive in, I would like to thank you for visiting Granny's Whisper channel. I was keeping house that summer the way only southern women know how. Windows propped with a wooden spoon, iced tea sweating in tall glasses, a lemon-pound cake cooling on the counter like a small sun. The magnolia out front had decided to bloom all at once, and the bees were drunk with good fortune. Into this golden afternoon came Mariah, my brother's child, my niece in blood and my daughter in everything that matters. She burst through my kitchen door as if joy itself had learned how to use a doorknob. She held a bridal magazine so thick it could have propped a table, and her eyes shone like she'd just been told the ocean was hers. "Auntie," she gasped, "he asked." "He asked?" "Who?" I teased, even though we both knew. There was only one man whose name rode around on her breath these days like a hummingbird. Victor Hale, entrepreneur, philanthropist when a camera was watching, possessor of a smile that could make a streetlight blink on in noon sun. Mariah grabbed my hands and we danced in a circle right there on the kitchen tiles while the cake cooled and the ice melted and time took a small, respectful bow. We went dress shopping 2 days later. The salon had mirrors that made you tell yourself prettier lies and a woman with a tape measure around her neck like a priest's stole. Mariah tried on satin that whispered and lace that sang. She tried on a cloud of tulle that made her look like a rare flower about to be named. When she stepped out in the one, the dress with the tiny buttons like pearls down the back and a train that rippled like a sigh, the room itself forgot to breathe. "That one," I said, and the saleslady nodded with the solemnity we reserve for miracles. We took pictures. We sent them to no one. We kept the secret of that dress like a holy thing. On the way home, Mariah talked about flowers and menus and colour palettes as if she were inventing spring. She said Victor, the way a child says home. I listened and smiled and tucked away the little winces that came like gnats at dusk. I had lived long enough to know that a smile can hide a wobble, and a ring can't hold a promise if it doesn't fit the finger beneath it. But hope is a generous cook. It feeds even the doubts until they nap. The invitations went out, a clean cream with gold script so polite it dared you to RSVP on time. The church reserved, the hall paid for, the band booked. The caterer, a genius with rosemary and patience, signed in blood. 1,000 small decisions stacked like dominoes ready to delight. And then, the night before the wedding, a phone buzzed on the counter and toppled the whole line. We were at my house making pew bows, those extravagant little puffs of ribbon that convince you lace is currency, when Mariah's phone buzzed against the marble. She glanced, smiled, and went on tying. The phone buzzed again, then again. It buzzed the way a person clears their throat when they're carrying bad news and manners. "Who is it?" I asked, teasing, because that's what a woman my age does when she's trying to keep a young woman's balloon from floating too close to the ceiling fan. "I don't recognize the number," she said, shrugging. Then she frowned. "It's a link? And a video?" Before I could say a word, she had clicked. The screen filled with a hotel hallway I'd never seen, and a door I wish I never had. The camera wobbled, then steadied. The door opened. Victor stepped out, shirt untucked, tie hanging limp like a secret that didn't bother to straighten its own collar. A woman's hand, manicured red, reached to smooth his hair. He kissed that hand, careless and practiced. He turned down the hallway, laughing. The video ended. Then a second video arrived. Documents, a screenshot of a marriage certificate, another woman's name next to Victor Hale, dated 18 months ago in another county, neatly filed, stamped, recorded, sealed, the way lies like to clothe themselves. There are times when fury is a bonfire, and times when it is a single blue flame, almost invisible until you touch it and burn clean through to bone. Mariah didn't scream. She didn't break. She simply went very still. So still I thought my own breath might shatter her. "Auntie," she said, voice small as paper, "I can explain this. He can explain this. It's a mistake." And I, who had lived long enough to know how men explained, took her face in my hands. "Baby, we make space for truth. That's all. We call him and ask him to meet us at the church, now. We call his pastor. We call his mother if we must, his lawyer if we must, his God if we must. But we stand in a place with an altar and ask the truth to walk up the aisle." She nodded once, like a soldier given orders she would have chosen anyway. We turned off the oven. We left the bows half-tied on the counter, little clouds arrested mid-sky. We drove to the church under a sunset that had the audacity to be beautiful. He was there when we arrived. Victor, suit jacket over his arm, smile on his face like a weapon he'd forgotten to put away. He stepped forward as if he might take Mariah's hands. She kept them at her sides. "What's wrong, love?" he asked. She spoke with a clarity I would bottle if I could. "Are you married?" He went very still. He looked at me, then back at her. He did not ask for context. He did not say, "To whom?" He did not say, "What do you mean?" He closed his eyes. Silence can be a confession. So can breath. Mariah held out the phone, the video waiting like a small, tired angel who had done its dreadful job. He watched. Then she swiped to the certificate. He looked. Then he sat down in the front pew like a man who had discovered gravity. "It was complicated," he began. The coward's hymn. "I was helping her with her visa. She was in a difficult situation, and it was supposed to be annulled. It was supposed to be legal," I asked, because someone had to keep the floor from tipping. "You mean it was supposed to be laundered?" He flushed. "We were separated." "It wasn't. She wasn't. I didn't think." "You didn't think," Mariah said softly. "That part is clear." He reached for her then, real panic knocking the polish from his charm. "I love you." This is a fixable mistake. Fixable? Her laugh was not unkind. It was something worse. "Victor, you have a wife." He opened and closed his mouth like a fish newly acquainted with air. In the side aisle, the statue of Saint Joseph stared at us with that particular patience reserved for carpenters and saints. Somewhere far off, a child practiced scales on a piano and refused to learn where the sharps lived. "Cancel it," Mariah said. "Tomorrow, today, Call your lawyer. Call her. Fix your life. I'll fix mine. You can't be serious, he whispered, as if the word were a curse. What will people say? The guests, the money, the truth, I said, because sometimes the shortest sermon is the best. They'll say the truth. Victor stood, scrubbed his face hard and made a choice that would shadow him. He reached for anger because men who have lost the right to shame often settle for rage. You sent that video, he hissed at me. You've never liked me. You've been trying to pry us. Stop, Mariah said. Don't talk to her like that. Don't talk at all. She took the ring from her finger and set it on the pew between us like an offering she had decided belonged on another altar. I'm not marrying you. He stepped forward, one step, only one, saw her face, and knew the math. He gathered his suit jacket, left the church, and stepped into a future that would be smaller because he had made it so with his own hands. We sat in that church a long time without speaking. The candles were electric, but they flickered anyway, out of either good manners or bad wiring. I didn't ask. Finally, Mariah asked the question women ask when their world is a house with no roof. What do we do? We call people, I said. The truth has legs, it will help us. We cancel what we can, reroute what we can't, and refuse to be ashamed of his choices. She nodded. The set of her mouth was new to me and familiar to heaven. It was the shape a woman's lips make when she has found the floor of her own strength. Do you know what it is to call a caterer and say, there will be no wedding? To call a florist and say, please, just don't throw the flowers away. We'll think of something. To call cousins with hair appointments, uncles with polished shoes, aunties with dress hats waiting like caged birds, and tell them to put it all back in the closet and fold the day into a drawer labelled not today. It is to taste humiliation and decide not to swallow it. It is to build a small raft out of facts and grace and trust the river. People were kinder than I expected and crueler than I wanted. Some said, thank God you found out in time and meant it. Some said, are you sure? He's such a nice man, and meant nothing. One fool said, but the money. And I took the phone from Mariah before it turned into a weapon. The wedding planner, God bless her practical soul, pivoted like a ballerina with a grocery list. We can turn the reception into a community dinner, she said. We've got food for 200. We can feed whoever shows up. We can send trays to shelters and the night shift at the hospital. Mariah looked at me. I looked at her. We both smiled. Yes, she said. And her voice sounded like a woman who had found a path through brambles by inventing shoes. We stayed up all night doing little things with big feelings. We wrote a message for the church door. No ceremony today, but all are welcome to supper at 6. We told the band to play anyway. Something joyful, something that didn't require a bride to dance. We asked the florist to deliver the arrangements to the reception hall and the oncology ward. We told the cake baker to slice the cake and remove the topper. No bride, no groom, just sugar and survival. At 3 a.m, Mariah went into the spare bedroom where the dress hung like a sail waiting for wind. She took it down. She folded it, slowly, reverently, as if laying a child to sleep. I wanted to say 100 things. I said only one. You are not the dress. She nodded, tears bright, but not blinding. I know. At 6, the hall filled with faces. Some had been invited, most had not. Men took off their caps, women took off their earrings, children took off their shoes because dancing is easier barefoot. The band struck up a tune that knew the difference between grief and failure. The caterer sent out platters like a general deploying kindness. Rosemary chicken, buttered beans, little potatoes that roll around a plate and remind you life still plays. I stood by the door with Mariah and greeted, not as hostages of gossip but as women with spoons and stamina. People hugged her as if she were made of breakable light. Some cried, some laughed. Most just ate and blessed the food, which is how communities apologize for not seeing what you were carrying. Halfway through the evening, Pastor Roland found me by the punch bowl and said, "May I say something?" I raised an eyebrow, the way women do at men who like microphones, but nodded. He tapped the mic. The room didn't hush. It settled. "Today," he said, "we were supposed to celebrate a wedding. Instead, we're celebrating something quieter but just as holy. A woman who told the truth to herself and let the truth stand up. We're celebrating a family that turned a hurt into hospitality." He gestured to the back where stacks of foil trays were being labelled with shelter names and hospital floors. We're celebrating the fact that wasted love is a myth. Love spent on the wrong person is still love. And love poured into a community never returns empty. So eat, dance, help pack. And if you catch anyone whispering about what didn't happen today, whisper back to them about what did. The band played Stand By Me. People did. We sent food into the night like little ships carrying light. When the last song faded and the last tray left, and the floor looked like it had survived joy, we turned out the lights and locked the door on our own terms. Outside, the air was cool and honest. Mariah slipped her hand through my arm. "That wasn't a disaster," she murmured. "No," I said, "that was a harvest." Grief doesn't keep office hours. It comes at noon and at 3 a.m. It comes when you're washing spoons and when you're trying to remember where you put the stapler. It came from Mariah like tide, regular and insistent. She spent a week on my couch sleeping in slices, crying in the kind of sobs that don't ask permission, then laughing at cat videos with a ferocity that suggested either recovery or insanity. I made soup. I made lists. I took the dress to a consignment shop that smelled like clean closets and asked the owner to do the kindest thing she could with it. She touched the fabric, nodded once, and said, "I know just the girl." On the 8th day, Mariah stood up, smoothed her hair, and said, "I can't go back to the job." She was an office manager for a company with clean floors and dirty rumours, the kind that trains you to smile with your teeth and swallow your truth. "I quit. I want to cook." Now, darling, let me tell you something I have learned. When a woman who has just cancelled a wedding tells you she wants to feed people, get a notebook. Something holy is about to grow legs. We took the little money refunded from the venue and the band and bought a second-hand convection oven that looked like it had opinions. We cleared out my garage, painted the floor the colour of resolve, hung shelves, got the permits that make men with clipboards say, "Fine," and put up a sign over the roll-up door, "Second day supper." Our first orders came from neighbours who had eaten at the Notta wedding, trays of lemon chicken, aluminum pans of macaroni that made grown men weep, roasted carrots that could have converted cynics. Then the church called, then the school, then the plant manager at the factory with the graveyard shift. We cooked. We cooked like women who had learned that heat applied with love transforms raw into ready. At night, When the kitchen cooled and the pans gleamed and the floor squeaked clean, we sat with our feet in bowls of warm water and counted the day's blessings like tips. 2 grandmothers hugged. 1 small boy who tried a green bean and lived. 3 nurses fed at 3 a.m. A new tray sent to the women's shelter with a note, "You are not the leaving that was done to you." Sometimes we cried. More often we slept the sleep of women whose hands have finally found their work. He came on a Tuesday when the heat was the kind that makes onions weep early. He was there to repair the convection oven, the one that had decided to blow hot and cold like a teenage poet. He wore a ball cap with a paint stain on the brim and a kindness that didn't announce itself. On his forearm, a small burn scar shaped like an accidental constellation. "Name's Daniel Reyes," he said. "Heard you're feeding half the county." "Not all at once," I said, because sass is how I flirt with fate. He crouched, listened to the machine the way a doctor listens to a chest, then stood and delivered the diagnosis in words Mariah could understand. She's doing her best with a broken sensor and a story about the past that isn't true anymore. He ran a hand over the metal like a man calming a horse. "We can fix that." He came back the next day with the part, and the next with a tray of conchas his mother had sent for the ladies. And the next because, he said, the door still sounds like a door that doesn't believe in itself. We learned small things about him. He had a daughter named Luce who could braid hair better than angels. He worked odd jobs between steady contracts and didn't mind saying I don't know when he didn't. He laughed like a man who had had to practice and now did it for the pleasure. He wore his wedding ring on a chain around his neck, not because someone had hurt him, but because someone had died. A wife named Alma, gone 6 years now. The grief in his voice no longer raw, just reverent. He did not flirt with Mariah. He did not fix her with eyes or try to be the first to make her laugh. He carried things. He tightened bolts. He remembered how she took her coffee. When she forgot to eat, he held out a spoon like a sacrament and said, "Taste." I watched from my corner with my ledger and my prayers and said nothing to hurry or hinder. One evening, after the last tray had left and the dusk had painted the world in forgiveness, I found them at the back step. Mariah sitting with her knees pulled up, Daniel on the bottom stair, his forearms crossed loosely, the burn scar catching the last light like history. She was telling him about the text, the video, the certificate, the church. She spoke without drama, without edits. He listened the way a carpenter listens to a wall, for studs, for hollows, for the places you can safely hang weight. When she finished, he didn't say, "What a jerk." He didn't say, "You deserve better," though both were true. He said, "You fed people anyway." She looked at him. "We had to do something." "You did the better thing," he said. I went back inside and sat at my old kitchen table and let my heart be quiet. Sometimes the only work required of us is to not interfere when Grace is learning someone's name. 3 months into our second act, a note appeared on the garage door, tucked under the hasp with a $10 bill and the roughness of a man who had practiced apologies only in mirrors. "Victor," Auntie, the note read. He always called me that, though I never gave him permission. "I've annulled the marriage. It took longer than it should have because I hid longer than I ought to have. I'm sorry for the harm. I know sorry is cheap. Please tell Mariah I will not bother her. I will make restitution for the deposit she lost. She does not have to answer me. I will always be ashamed." I stood there a long while, the bill warm from the sun, the paper humming with cowardice and courage braided tight. I walked inside and showed it to Mariah. She read it once, twice. She put it down like a hot pan. "I don't want his money," she said. "Of course you don't," I said. "And of course you will take it. And of course we will launder it into good." I tapped the ledger. "The shelter's freezer died last week. The clinic needs a new cot. We'll let his shame learn to be useful." She looked at me, my fierce girl, my cook of saints, and nodded. "All right," she said, "but I won't meet with him." "You don't have to," I said. Forgiveness is not an appointment. Later that week, Mariah wrote a letter, short, clean, kind, final. "I wish you well on a path far from mine. Thank you for doing the right thing at last. Please direct any further restitution to second day supper. Attention. Community Fund." She signed it with her full name as if returning to herself in ink. And that, my dears, was that. The story did not require a face-to-face, a scene in a cafe, a speech that costs more than it returns. Sometimes the most dramatic thing a woman can do is nothing. To choose her own porch, her own peace, and her own pot to stir. Winter came quiet and crisp, the kind that makes breath look like speech. We had more orders than we had pans. The town learned our rhythm. Tuesdays for casseroles, Fridays for fish, Sundays for mercy. On Christmas Eve, we staged a feast with no wedding, a tradition that would outlive us all. We borrowed linen from the church, candles from everyone, chairs from the school, and filled the hall with people who had not RSVP'd to anything good in a long time. I watched Mariah move through that room of faces with a tray balanced on her palm like a promise. She was not a bride. She was something larger, a woman who had chosen her own ceremony. Daniel arrived late, flower on his shoulder, loose asleep against his chest. He set the girl on 2 chairs pushed together and covered her with his coat, and then went to the sink to help without being asked. He wore his wedding ring on the chain. He wore his grief like an heirloom and his hope like a new hat he hadn't decided he deserved. At the end of the night, after the last spoon had found its drawer and the last blessing had found its mark, we stood in the doorway and watched the snow fall a little and then change its mind. "Walk?" Daniel asked Mariah. "Just to the corner," she said. They went. I turned off the lights and locked the door behind my girls and didn't walk to the window to see if they kissed. I am not a woman who spies. I am a woman who prays and trusts the mathematics of kindness to do its quiet work. Spring again. The magnolia bloomed like a show-off. Second day supper had 4 part-time helpers, a waiting list, and a reputation for rosemary that bordered on scandal. We got a thank you note from the night shift at the hospital that made us sit down and cry. We see life start and end. You fed the middle. One evening, I found Mariah and Daniel at the long prep table making tamales and sweet tea, a bilingual supper that tasted like a future where differences are ingredients, not arguments. They worked in rhythm, handing, rolling, tying, laughing, remembering to be gentle with themselves. After the last tray was stacked and the floor was safe enough to dance on, Daniel took the ring from around his neck, kissed it, put it in his pocket, and looked at the woman who had taught a town how to turn grief into food. "Mariah," he said, "I am not a man who thought he got to start again. But I am a man who knows how to keep what he's given. I won't ask you to marry me now. Not here, not with onions in our hair. I will ask you to date me like children with picnics. I will ask to hold your hand when it is convenient, and when it is not. I will ask to take the trash out and never mention it in arguments. I will ask to love you without needing a stage. She looked at him a long time with that soft, serious light I have only ever seen on the faces of women bearing good fruit. Yes, she said. Not one day. Not we'll see. Just yes, a word that fit the room. He did not shout. He washed the knife he'd been using as if it were holy. And then he reached for her hand and kissed the inside of her wrist, a promise old as language. They did get married. Eventually, but not loudly. On a morning so clear you could see God's handwriting in the sky, they stood under the magnolia with 3 witnesses and a short vow. I will not run when the oven breaks or the money's thin or the hurting is loud. I will feed what we have until it rises. They wore aprons over good clothes and laughed when the bandana slipped from Luz's hair. I cried like women cry when they see a second chance tie its own shoes. We served lemon cake on paper plates and sent leftovers to anyone who would take them. We did not toss a bouquet. We planted basil. Now, when I pass the consignment shop and see a bride light up in a mirror, I bless her with every good thing and none of the illusions. I bless her with a husband who keeps receipts for his soul, with in-laws who bring soup and silence in equal measure, with a self that doesn't vanish under chiffon. As for Victor, he left town at last, or maybe he simply left our stories. I hear he pays his bills on time and keeps a framed copy of his annulment in his office to remind him that lies accrue interest. That is his business and the Lord's. Second day supper is the kind of success that doesn't make the papers, steady, unstylish, faithful. We feed the basketball team on away game nights. We feed grief at 2 in the morning when casseroles are scarce. We feed joy when babies come early and loud. We feed the men who pick up trash and the women who teach spelling and the boy who learned his times tables over macaroni because no one had taught him steak. Sometimes, after a long day, I catch Mariah washing the last pan with her head tipped back, singing one of Alma's songs with Luz, Daniel keeping time on the counter with a wooden spoon. I see the woman she did not get to be and the woman she chose instead. And I prefer the latter in a way that makes me blush for the faith I didn't have before. So if you're listening tonight and your big plan just collapsed like a cake you opened the oven on too soon, hear me. It is not over. You can feed people with what fell. You can turn a no into supper. You can hang your ring on a nail and put your hands to dough and find that your heart knows recipes your head never memorized. And if a good man with a burn scar knocks on your door carrying a part for a machine you didn't know how to fix, let him in. Let him show you that repair is a love language. Let him wash the spoon. This is Granny. Thank you for keeping me company tonight. Until next time, if your plans fall down, call it a renovation. Keep a pot on. Keep a seat open. Keep your yes for someone who has earned it. And keep your light where you can count it. Good night, my dear ones.